we start?
Good afternoon, everybody, and welcome. My name is Colleen Stovall, and I'm the Director of Programs and Events for AIA Miami and for the Miami Center for Architecture and Design. We're really glad you're here this afternoon for a great program. I just have a few quick slides talking about upcoming events. October is our month-long celebration of architecture in the built environment. And if you check the AIA and MCAD websites, you can get all the details. There's a great film screening for the Miami Architecture and Design Film Festival coming up this Thursday at 7 p.m. The film is Owned: A Tale of Two Americas, and that'll be Zoom screen. No, I'm sorry, live at MCAD. So there's the list. We have other events coming up during the month. And the AIA Design Awards celebration is on the 29th. So look for information on that. And Give Miami Day is coming up. MCAD is AIA Miami's not-for-profit arm. And on Give Miami Day, we're hoping everyone will help support the work we do there. And that's it. Please put any questions you may have today in the for the panel in the chat. We'll get to them towards the end of the program. And please, right now, take a moment to mute yourselves and turn off your video. This helps with bandwidth, and we have a better experience on the program. And that's it. Right now, I would like to introduce Eduardo Khalil Jr., and he will moderate today's panel.
Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Eduardo Khalil Jr. from Khalil Architects, and I'll be moderating this event. All right, just open up. Let's go with a brief on. So the creation of a small architecture firm comes with the understanding that multiple disciplines and responsibilities will be juggled with a relatively small group of individuals. How and when do you decide to branch off? How and when do you decide to branch off and start your own thing? When we will be hearing from panelists on the risks and rewards of creating, growing, and managing a small firm, sharing their stories, and taking that leap of faith. With us today, we have Bernard Ziskovich of Ziskovich Architects, Daphne Gurri of Gurri Matute Architects, Jacqueline Gonzalez Tuze of Tuze Studio, and Jason Hagopian of Nouveau Architects. All right, so we'll start with the first question for the panelists. Is there a way to know when you're ready to expand, besides the obvious that you do not have the time to do all the work yourselves? Is there a certain amount of money, jobs, resources before you make that jump to expand?
Eduardo, I'll take a stab at answering that question, just get things rolling for everybody. Again, my name is Daphne Gurri. I'm founding principal to Gurri Matute. And to answer the question, one of my biggest lessons learned, I've been in business 25 years, and I'm in partnership with my husband, Jose Matute, who's also joined the call, was that like in order to keep the flow of work coming, you almost right away have to start thinking about expanding yourself and not doing the work yourself. Because if you get stuck doing the work yourself, then you can't get new business. So that's the biggest lesson learned for me. Yes, I'm an architect, but I'm an entrepreneur and business owner. And immediately, as soon as you get that first project, immediately you have to start looking for your next client and keep that pipeline growing. So I would recommend to start right away by having someone that can work with you on the plans.
Well, I'll go next. It's been quite a while since I started the firm. I started mostly because the job I had, I loved so much, and then there were new partners and I found my role changing. And because I felt that I really had a purpose in trying to, make sure that my career went in a direction that I wanted, I decided to move on and start my own thing. So I actually started with a renovation, and soon after got a new house. I worked out of my house. My son was born and I quit my job and I did this thing. And maybe because I'm of the age I am and the experiences I had, I figured, well, if it doesn't work out, I'll go to graduate school or I'll do something else. But Daphne's right. When you're already engaged at a certain level of career, in my case, I had maybe 4 or 5 years of experience, and I felt very unhappy and felt like I wanted to move on and give it a shot. So for me, it was really an economic decision. I figured that the fees I could earn by doing it myself were actually exceeded what I was earning as a salary, and I could probably live on it for a year or two. And I figured maybe that gives me enough time to make it work. So, but immediately you have to start looking for other work and you need to get help. And so it does help to have a good business plan. But I don't believe necessarily that you have to have everything set up in order to take the leap.
Yeah, I think for sometimes also life kind of presents an opportunity, and you take it, and it has a lot to do with, I think both Daphne and Bernard, described two different places where you are in life, and you're a student and you're willing to try it. You don't have a lot, and you have a good safety net or parents or family that can help you, then you're going to be looking at one set of options. But if you are already, mid-level career, you're trying to do it, and you have a certain lifestyle and children to maintain and mortgages to pay, then you have a different scenario. So it really, I think it's fairly unique to whoever the person is. Our particular instance was, Carlos was a director of design for Ad Inc., which became Santec. And I was with Architectonica. So we were both with two big firms, used to a certain, not crazy lifestyle, but we were okay, doing all right. So to go on our own was a little scary because we had 2 young children. And I don't know that we would have, except that Carlos was let go. And so what became a kind of like, ooh, what do we do? It actually was the best thing that ever happened to us. So we took that opportunity. I went to work for Related for a year, doubled my salary, and he started Tuesday Studio while we caught our breath. So sometimes there's a grand plan and sometimes there's not a grand plan, and you just roll with it. And yes, to Daphne's point, immediately the thing became, well, what do you do? How do you get your next job? And how do you maintain that? Because it's a little scary when you have all your eggs in one basket and you're both of you working together, which is why I worked for a time for a developer until we could get ourselves get that next job and then that next job. And then when we felt comfortable that was going to happen, then I joined the firm. So Carlos started, in a very small office with a very small footprint to test the concept to see if we could do it. I was working at nights with him, on weekends with him. And then when we felt comfortable that we had enough clients and enough revenue to make it happen, then I really couldn't wait to get out of the development world, because that's not what I do. But it did help pay the bills while we didn't have that independent financing option. But your friends and family help. You have a support network. We're very fortunate that our brother-in-law gave us a break on the office space, so that wasn't a big concern. And if you're not independently wealthy, then you have to kind of lean into your relationships in life and work really, really hard in the beginning, keep things kind of simple, and spend the money. I would say the most important thing is the people, more than the fancy office, more than anything else, and slowly build that up, and then the good things happen when you have a great team. So that.
Yeah, and I can just piggyback off of what Jacqueline said, as far as kind of, for me, and I just started my business, Nuvio Architects, 3 months ago. So I'm like I guess I'm the newbie in the group, but of course, me from being around for a while, because I managed Sao Design Group here in Miami for the last 19 years. But I always, the biggest expense, as Jacqueline stated, is your employees, is your staff, and knowing, being able to add new staff. Very similar to what Daphne had to say also, you have to do that in order to do what you need to do, which is bring in more work. So it's kind of like the chicken and the egg, or the cat chasing its tail, I guess. You know, you can't do one without the other, but you have to pay people usually. So, and you have expenses. And for me, it's always like these kind of like these little mountains that we have to reach the crest of these mountains before we can climb to the next highest peak. And it gets you for a little bit chaotic because you have to be very busy and busy enough to warrant bringing on additional staff usually, because you do have to pay them, and they are a big expense. So, but that's really exciting, because the more chicken and the egg and the more cat chasing its tail that's happening, it starts to self perpetuate, you know, and you really start building a reputation, and you do hire great people like Jacqueline had stated. And if you do those things and you're good at what you do, you can keep expanding. I think that's the idea, as much as you want to. I guess you have to make a decision what you also want individually.
So Jason, you brought up a good point. So the expanding leads on to our next big point, which is, how do you entrust these sort of responsibilities? I mean, you started your own thing. You have maybe a partner or two that you already entrusted with responsibilities, but now you have to have new hires. You have to give new responsibilities, and you're taking that away from yourself onto others. So how do you build that trust? How do you decide, hey, this is the right person for the job? Is it somebody that you already had in your firm and you move them up, or is it an outsourced condition that you bring them in and you take that risk that you're giving them these responsibilities that were previously yours?
I'm just going to start with this one then, so I get out of the way. I always try to hire people that can do things better than I can. If I can find that person, then I'm all set.
I'll go next. I think it's important to, at the beginning, your reputation is everything, and you don't really have a track record. So it's really important to stay in touch with the preparation of your design and drawings, because you want to make sure that you don't have any mistakes as you're preparing the plans, and you're giving that attention to the customers. Many times the client is coming to you because they're going to be able to work with the owner. People like that. They're going to work with the principal and the owner. But trust is something that takes time. You have to maybe consider spending time training people to do things your way. And that's not like a 5-minute thing. Even if you bring in a consultant, they still have learned things their own way. So you have to kind of get them to do things your way, because you have your own way. So I think that's important to embrace that and understand that it's not going to be a 5-minute thing. And there's nothing that you're going to trust more than the person that's going to be preparing your invoices to your clients. And that's like the most important thing: paying your bills and invoicing your clients, and ultimately taking care of your payroll. So again, you want to, at the beginning, get very in touch with your accounting finance side of running a business, so that you can, again, assist the person that's going to take that over, and be able to make sure that you can focus on getting new business and taking care of your customers while somebody is taking care of running the business.
And I know a really quick question on that. Just, did you feel immediately, or did it take a while to feel that trust with these other employees to take over those responsibilities that were previously yours? Like the trust on it.
Yeah, I'll wrap it up to let somebody else continue with that conversation. Yeah, no, it's not a 5-minute thing, but the sooner that you can get over it, like, Jason's saying, try to find people that are going to be more talented and more comfortable at what they do best. Like somebody that does bookkeeping is going to be happy doing numbers. And I don't know how many architects love doing numbers, but, there are people that love doing numbers, and they love, following up on collections. And that's an important part of running any business. So I would say give yourself some patience, and be mindful over, your customers, and making sure that your work the quality of your work is always going out the way that you would have done it yourself.
Okay.
I think that trust issue is key. I mean, I think of it as an ensemble. So it depends on what you do really well. You want to balance your team out. And like I think Jason and Daphne were saying, to hire people that are really, really good at what they do and to balance your strengths with somebody else's strengths. So if you're really good at design, and we happen to be two design principals, so our studio skews heavily to design. We both are doing this really because we want to be more involved with the design of each project. So we needed to build strength in construction documents and in the business side and all of that, because they are essential functions through any office. You can't have a business without it. But if we become only about getting new work and not designing, then we wouldn't be happy principals. So our whole thing in these last 16 years has been about making sure that what we're building is something that we actually are excited about going to and participating with, because it's not for us about building a business. It's about design. It's about doing beautiful projects and being involved with the process. And that has been, at a time when a lot of firms are going global and, everything is sort of bigger and bigger firms. For being a small firm and doing that and finding that balance is really, it's really hard. And it takes a lot of time to train people, especially if you're very picky, which I'll just say it right up front. We are control freaks and picky. To find that balance of that you can let go of things that you don't need to do and do the things that you do really well. I don't think even 16 years into it that we have found that that's an easy thing to do. It's individual. In the beginning, we hired people we had worked with at Architectonic or different places. So there was already that built-in trust that we already knew each other. We worked together, we knew each other. But it takes time and training and getting to know people to do the thing the way you do it, or because everybody has their own brand, they have their own approach to the work. And Daphne's right. Sometimes you get a very experienced person, they come the full set of skills, but they're doing it the way they learned in corporate America to do it, and that's not the way we do it in our small studio. So there's always the culture of place and the emphasis on certain things that we want to maintain. But you also want to have a welcoming environment where people come with new ideas, new technology, new approaches, and you can grow and incorporate those things. And it is very much like an ensemble. And sometimes somebody comes in with something we haven't seen before that's pretty neat. And we want to be an open enough environment that you can have that. So we've always drifted toward our vision of this whole thing was an atelier, a studio environment, a sharing of ideas, a sharing of of working with really great professionals. And it does require trust, but it also requires training and time with those people to make sure that they gain from you. People come to work with you because also they want to engage with the way that you do the work. And I have come to be at peace with the idea that it's not for everyone. Some people are really happy doing work that never changes, and it is a very kind of set thing, and other people are okay with change and okay for everyone, and that's okay.
It is. Jackie, you brought up a good point, but I'm gonna jump to I'm gonna bring up a topic of office culture in a second, because you brought up a good point there, and I'd like to talk about it. But let's hear from Bernard first on this previous topic.
Well, thank you, Eddie. I think that everything that's been said is correct. I feel like our practice kind of took the path more like Jackie and Carlos in terms of our emphasis. But I think there's a couple of kind of prevailing ideas that were very fundamental to the way that I wanted to build the practice. One is, aside from trust and competence, I wanted to make sure that anyone that I hired was somebody I wanted to spend time with, because there's so much time involved that to have somebody in the office that can be disruptive has a geometric impact that breeds negativity. So I would encourage people to think of it as office and competence. But if possible, it's not always possible, try to find people where you have the compatibility. And then to the point that Jackie made, I came from some experience that had public as well as private projects. And I made a decision very early on, because I could have very easily personally gone in the direction of, doing houses and exploring only the design ideas. But I really felt that I wanted to have a civic presence. And I've really focused the firm on being able to do quality work that has impact, still do the design. So I guess the other lesson is, aside from trust, because trust is something that you have to deal with. It's not a choice. You have to find a way at some point to allow others to help you, because that's the whole point of having others. So you have to, no matter what, how picky or not picky you are, eventually all of us have to allow someone else to help us. But I think that the real point is to design your own practice, have a vision of where and the type of work that you want to have, so that you can begin to do the legwork. I'll never forget one of the first projects I did as I think the firm was maybe 3 people. I got a project for HUD housing to replace 100 bathrooms and windows, apartments for bathrooms and kitchens in a low income, quote unquote, project. And I learned a lot, because I used to do presentations at that time talking about what I cared about, which was design. And I realized that I can't really get there that way. And what I ended up talking about was schedule and budget. And then I won my first project, which was frankly extremely difficult, as you might imagine. But it sets up the next one. So that's what I mean by having a vision of where you want to go. You have to kind of lay the groundwork. It's either going to be in one direction or another direction, but that would be very helpful, I believe, to anyone starting out. It's not just a matter of getting the work, as Jackie says, it's about directing the emphasis toward the work of the kind of work you want to be doing, and investing and doing that, so that you can build that kind of practice.
So with regard to the people that you hired, the individuals that you hired, and you mentioned that you wanted sort of an office culture or like-minded individuals with maybe similar or better than we all are, so that they can help our firms progress.
We all agree with Jason. We want to hire people better than we are.
We always want better. But the other thing is cultivating this sort of, let's call it a family within our firm. We have to cultivate them. How do we do that? What sort of individual or unique office culture things do you implement in your firm? And it could be just simple, bowling nights with the team every so often. It could be going out for drinks. It could be just lunch every so often with everyone in your firm. But what sort of office culture elements do you have to create this sort of environment where everyone is happy to be at the office, where it doesn't feel so much like work, but they enjoy doing the work because of where they are and the people that they are around?
That's a great question. I'll start a little bit. I mean, I think, a successful, happy office culture is sort of, will lead to all of these things like lunches and people going out for drinks and bowling night. But, it's like getting to that point, right? That's the challenge. It's not about Daphne saying, look, we're going to do cocktails every other Friday. If people don't want to go to have cocktails with Daphne, that's not going to make a happy office culture. So for me, and part of this does lead to the trust issue. I've probably, to a fault, I'm very trusting, and I believe in being very transparent with my teams and my staff, so they understand how the business works, especially now that I'm running the business and I have a vision for how I want to run the business and share the business, the highs and the lows with my entire team. None of us, Bernard, Daphne, Jacqueline, none of us can produce the amazing projects that we produce without our team. It's impossible. That's why we have the teams. It doesn't happen. I always have to make sure that I recognize my team whenever we are recognized as a firm, whether I'm recognized, that it's not just me. I put all these people together. Of course, it's my primary vision, but I think so I like to be honest and open with my team about how the business works, how we make money, how we don't make money, and how we share, my vision for sharing what we're doing here, whether it's creating a project, creating a vision, sharing in the finances, sharing in the profit sharing. for me, that's really important. And I'm really happy that I have a principal that was with me at all of the people that were at the firm that I was working with, I hired them all back here. And so I have a principal that's been with me for 17 years and 5 years and 10 years. And I like to think that of the people that didn't stay with us, of course, there's been many over the many years, but a lot of them have started their own firms. So I like to think, A, they were like super talented, so I hired the right person. You know, did they have the same idea that I had and wanted to get out on their own? You know, of course, that's fine. A lot of them have grown to have very successful firms. And to me, I feel like that's a good testament to the way we kind of mentor and teach our staff members and our teams here. So
Yeah, and it seems you have an openness to your culture in your firm, which also works with the trust. They trust you with how open you are with your team, and they and that's a culture that you've created.
It's important for me. Yeah.
I think post-pandemic, I would answer that question also a little differently, because I think this idea that you try to keep people in the studio and you know, all the bells and whistles that the tech companies were doing with the ping pong tables and the beer pong and all of that to make people feel like they really never want to go. I guess as a mother and somebody who has a family and had to balance all of that, I have a different take on that, in that if you want to do that, we definitely have a culture for that. And when we were in Wynwood, we did the beer tastings, and we did, you know, the lunches on Friday, and we do our Prosecco birthday celebration. So there's a culture of celebrating and being together when we're together. But I actually think that it's been lacking in our profession is a respect for people's time. And I would rather people go home and be with their families and have a balance in their lives, rather than dream up different ways in which we can all hang out together and be a family that way. I think, you know, what I think people come to you for when they work with you is to learn and to grow as professionals. So the things that I think are of the most value to what people tell me that they really enjoy about working with us, that I've tried to lean in on more, are those site visits, are the time that they get to spend with the principals working on details, are you know, the lunch and learns about materials where we really get into it, or, you know, the resiliency chalks, or you know, it's the learning, it's the growing. I think I, as a young professional, would only stay in a place as long as I felt that I was seen and that I was growing. And so I try to do that. And it's kind of that campfire rule that you leave every place you go better than you found it. I like to think that whether they stay or they don't stay, that when they leave here, they're better than when they came and they grew. And it's whatever I can do along their journey, wherever they come to us. And I want them to stay and I want them to grow with us. But, you know, sometimes you get interns and they're here for 2 years, they do amazing work, and then they're gone, and then they're doing their master's or they're doing whatever. But I still hear from them, and we still celebrate their successes. And if they're in Miami, they come and they visit. And we're a family that way, that we kind of are rooting for each other, and we're excited about each other's kind of growth that way. The best compliment I can get from somebody who worked with me is when they have their own firm, that they learned a lot, and that the reason they were able to feel confident enough to do it is that they felt like they grew. And I think that's a wonderful thing. That's what I'm very grateful that I got when I was at the different places that I was at. And I think it's more, you know, I think this idea that, you know, architects work day and night, and we want to make it kind of fun to be there day and night. And I think, you know, especially post-pandemic, when people realize you can work from home pretty effectively and still do great work, it's really about what are you getting out of your time at the end of those whatever years you spend at that studio. How much did you grow? How much did you learn? How much were you exposed to? And, you know, for us, culture is a huge thing. So when we have celebrations or parties or whatever, we try to go to places in the city. You know, if we're doing well financially, we make sure that everyone does well financially, to Jason's point, because that is ultimately a sign of how do you value someone. Do you pay them, and do you value their time? And I think I think people are really starting to get very real about that, more than the weird little perks and I mean, for me anyway, if I were somebody starting, that's definitely something I'd be looking at. Is
but that's important. You're respecting their time, you're respecting their families, their personal lives, and every so often you mentioned that you'll take them out for a reason, for some event, but not as frequent as it was pre-pandemic, because the world did change, everything changed, and cultures changed, quite frankly. Bernard, Daphne?
Yeah, well, you know, I think that, again, what everyone says is important. And it's interesting because our firms are all different sizes today, right? Everyone maybe went through the same process. And at least in our case, you know, we have several offices, and we have at this point quite a few people. And what I learned was to, you know, in the beginning, you need the bonding. As the firm grows and you end up larger and larger, it kind of develops into cells, and there's principals and partners that are really working more often with other people. So it all begins to kind of create a different structure. So my experience is that as the firm grows, the structure changes, and the amenities that might be appropriate to 5 people are not the same as to 50 people or to 100 people. And I think that that is a very important consideration. I think that the way you treat people is the most important thing. We don't look at the clock. We don't check who's coming in and who's going. If somebody has something they need, or they have a doctor's appointment, or they've got to take care of the kids, even pre-pandemic, we always let them take care of the other things. We just have one rule: get your job done. However that happens, just make sure you meet the deadline. And that's pretty much been it. Along the way, we've done many different things. To Jackie's point, at one point, we did hire one of these firms that's supposed to bring everyone together. And I can't tell you what a disaster that was for us. It was truly horrific, because one thing I've also learned is that it's really important not to set expectations in a way that you can't deliver them. If you're going to announce that you're going to be this XYZ kind of everybody's going to have a great time firm, if you don't deliver that, you have not delivered. So you have to be really, really careful. We have been trying to share profits with our firm whenever we're able, and it's been quite a few times over all these years. And I'm shocked at how much money we now have in our account. And the longer people stay, the more money they've accumulated. And I think that's one of those unknown gifts that I think keeps paying, because as people stay longer, they really start to feel like there's a financial benefit, there's a cultural benefit, there's a professional benefit. And if you start to think about those things in that way, it's amazing, even for firms that are, you know, and here I'm talking to maybe firms that have been around for a while, but not yet hit the big opportunity. Going ahead and setting those things up, even if they don't accumulate a whole lot up front, it does a lot for the employee base. And they really appreciate the fact that this is money the firm is putting away for them. It's not 401k that they do for themselves. So there's all kinds of things like that, to Jackie's point also, that you want to respect their time, you want to respect their effort. And my take is it's really a lot easier than people think. Just be honest and treat people with respect. And I think that's the most appreciated quality.
Mhm.
And I'm going to go ahead and say that's a pretty new concept of how firms treat their employees. And when I say
It's
new,
not
I
new
mean
for
last
us.
decade or two.
Yeah, as
It's been
someone,
that way
yeah.
from beginning.
Not every, but this new generation of firms, I find it interesting hearing that a lot. So that's always great to hear. Daphne, do you have?
I don't want to repeat what Jacqueline and Bernard and Jason have said, but I really appreciate hearing it coming from other business owners and architects running their own practices. Just to add to it, things that add value to the office culture, in addition to compensating somebody well, making sure that they have opportunities to learn, is your flexibility. So if there's someone that needs to be able to periodically pick up their kid at 2 o'clock in the afternoon and then come back. I mean, I'm a mother of 3. I've been through that. I've lived through that. And to your point, it's not like it's always been that way. It wasn't that way when I was an intern. It was very rigid, and you were expected to work, 12-hour days, et cetera. And that's just the way it was, if not longer. But I think from our perspective, we try to be as accommodating to the individual needs, because that brings happiness. If someone is worried about their child, that they need to pick up their child, they're not going to be able to focus. So if somebody has a work-life balance issue that is important to them, that they clock in at 7 and leave at 4 every day, well, then we're willing to accommodate, to Bernard's point, provided that, you know, your work is getting done. And I think the more that we do that, that creates that culture, because people want to be in a place where they're happy. They're going to spend more time with their co-workers and their bosses than they are with their own families. So, you know, that level of positivity and recognition, teaching them and allowing them to grow and building that trust so that they can also, you know, experience what it's like to work with the clients directly and gain more experience. Those are all the things that we're doing as well to keep the happy family. It's not just, you know, yeah, let's go out to have lunch. Well, they would love to have lunch, but they would rather all those other things first,
Right.
or a beer Friday or something like that.
So on that point, I'm sure you all have individual stories on how do you balance that, the happiness, the letting everyone have their own life and respecting their own life, but also when you start seeing too much respect happen in that direction, somebody might take advantage of that. Like, is there a quick story that we can hear on? Actually, we don't even have to touch on that too much, but it's something that just to think about, that's also something that you have to balance. If you have employees that feel like they have too much freedom, they might take advantage of that scenario. So that's like a balance that you have to try and
It's a
find.
balance, but at the end of the day, I think that the work shows. You
Right.
can have someone in your office that can be literally sitting down, warming up the chair, and their productivity isn't improving, and that's just what
this-
it is.
Which is to Bernard's point when he said that as long as they hit their deadlines, it's okay. And that's just something that you have to
Right.
reemphasize. Those deadlines need to be met and the importance of them.
Yeah, and the other thing is that you work in teams, right? So,
Right.
and if your teammates are working hard to get things done and you're not showing up and you're not doing your part, that's going to show up also in the
Exactly.
dynamic. And so if you have really good people, it's hard, you know, someone like that who's being irresponsible or not being a team player and not holding up their end is just going to stand out. And unfortunately, you know, when you're small, you can't afford to have that. So, you
There's
know,
no hiding this small
yeah,
firm.
with greater flexibility and freedom comes greater responsibility. You have to really do your part. Otherwise, you're going to let your team down, the studio down, and that doesn't work. You know, so as long as you're aware of that, then you know.
Yeah, but I also think you need to be aware that sometimes you have to let people go or tell them to leave.
Yes.
If they're disruptive and they're not really part of the team, as Jackie says. I mean, it's not an entitlement. It's a culture. So
Mhm.
if you buy into the culture also needs to convey dedication and you know and learning and all of those other things that you want, and growth. So it all kind of travels together. You can't take the parts and separate them because that won't work.
Yeah, I mean, we've had people that have come and they're a little burned out from being in a difficult place, and they're excited about the idea of having a regular life, and you know, they like to talk about this. But what happens is if they don't perform at the same level as everyone else, then we can't have them. You know, they have to maintain the work that everybody else is doing, because you know that's just life. It's not a hall pass to just kind of, you know, be very cavalier about the work and the deadlines. We all work off of deadlines. We all have clients that have a certain level of expectation quality wise. And as long as you're able to meet that, and if you need flexibility in your schedule to do so, and you know, we have 2 people that work flexible schedules, pick up their kids, but those people are aces. They know what they're doing. They don't need to check in with anyone. They're super
Right.
responsible people. So they can afford to ask for that, because they don't need to be checking in with people to get the feedback and the growth that they need. I think the people that have really suffered in this pandemic are the interns, because you learn like a sponge being in the room. when others around you that are more experienced, the learning and the growth that comes from that, I feel it's very hard to duplicate you by yourself in front of a computer screen. So you benefit from maybe additional time, but you know, someone who's much more senior than you could probably do it in a fraction and have more flexibility in how they deliver that. So it really has to do with where you are in your career as well. So don't,
Right. So on changing the topic a little bit here, just the topic of, so if I'm understanding everybody here, and I'm assuming that's very standard, that somebody started with a larger firm or another firm prior to starting your own thing. Now the question, and this is a question that a lot of individuals have, is when do you believe is the point? When is that jumping off point? When do you take that specific leap to go off on your own? Is it a matter of finding a partner, the right partner? You go off on your own by yourself and you just build a team from that, or maybe you're just working in a garage, doing everything yourself for a year or two until you start building that team. But when did you mentally decide this is the time for me to take this jumping off point?
I'll start. Like I said, I had kind of been with the same firm for over almost 24 years, actually. I began with them in San Francisco and opened their office here in Miami. And, you know, much of that, you know, to credit, I began there as a project coordinator. Then, you know, over the years, a project manager, and a junior associate principal, operating, you know, managing principal, got the opportunity to open this office here in Miami. So, but for me, and it's just, I guess, a personal story. So I don't know, I don't have the formula for when you should do this. If I can be a metric, you know, I'm 53, so I'd say, oh, when you're 53 is a perfect time to do it. But I would say, you know, it's going to be a different story for everybody. For me, it was about a sense of, I guess, happiness is fairly important. I think maybe there are times in your life that you know, you can manage and deal with some level of less than, you know, 100% happiness, and you know, but as I got older and was doing what I was doing and was feeling this sense of, and it's I guess it's happiness. I was going to say dissatisfaction, but it's really about not being really happy with my work world.
Well, and a parallel question to that would be, how did you feel during that time? Were you extremely nervous? This is something that you're starting on your own. You're doing your own thing. Or how long did it take you to start getting comfortable? And I know your firm is pretty fresh, so
yeah, so
you might not have a full answer to that one.
So
yet.
I will say that unhappiness there was sort of like you know, a straw that broke the camel's back, I suppose, where I had a very different idea that related to sharing the profits of the company when we had our best year ever in 2020 during COVID. Despite COVID, we had a crazy good year, and my boss and myself, we just have this different idea of how the finances and the profit sharing should happen. And I just hung up the Zoom call and like closed my eyes, and I was like, I'm just not doing this anymore. This is not. And I went home and told my husband, and he's like, it's about time. But I mean, you know, I think it's sort of like, it just, for me, it just was like, you know, of course I was super nervous and very scared and like, how's this going to work? And oh my God, what's going to happen? And I kind of knew I wasn't going to end up on the streets, you know, like homeless, but it is a business. You know, you have to run a business. Now it would be me paying all the bills, paying all the insurance. This is not just something I would say to anybody that you should just kind of like, you know, like, oh, I'm going to do it. Let me just start now. It does help, as Bernard said, to kind of have a plan, to know your finances. Like, luckily I was managing this office, so I understood how much it took to keep this engine running the way it was. But I would say, you guys, you have like one short life. If I have to get kind of like all ethereal, like I think it's important to understand this. And I was going to say, any of the people on this call that are working for firms that you feel like don't have a culture like mine, or Daphne's, or Bernard's, or Jacqueline's, I think you have to think about where you're working and why you're working there, to be honest with you. I mean, everybody should be, you know, if I ever had an employee that came to me and said, oh, I don't feel respected, I would be really upset. Like, I think you have to really feel like you belong somewhere. Yes, I know you're going to different offices to get different experiences and to build your background of your experience. But honestly, like, this is hard work, guys. All of your bosses, we all expect 110% from our employees. But that doesn't mean you shouldn't be, happy and respected. And I think for me, I was kind of to a point where I just wasn't feeling that. And for better or for worse, I'm doing this now. I'm very excited. It feels like the best decision I ever made my whole life. And I'm excited for what the future brings, just in the same way I think that any of the business owners on this call
So
feel.
I think that's very important. I think that's what everybody, I think you paraphrased pretty much what everybody's thinking. Like, happiness is one of the biggest jumping points for this kind of thing, because ultimately it's your own, it's your baby. It's something that you're creating, you're cultivating, and it's for your own personal happiness, and you want that happiness to become the culture around you. Let's jump to Bernard really quick. Maybe how did you, this sort of jumping off point, when did you decide it's time to go on my own?
Well, I think, as I mentioned earlier, I was 30 years old. I was working for Lester Pancoast, who was a big influence in my professional career at the time. I was one of the lead design people among three. We had a great system going. There were maybe 4 or 5 of us in the firm at the time, and we each took turns being the lead designer, and the rest of us were the production team for the first one. So that was what I was doing for my career years with Lester, and I loved it. And then firms evolved, they changed, got new partners, my role changed. I thought, well, this is the moment of truth. I got some good recommendations. I had something to start with, and I took the leap, literally. It was probably fortunate that I was ignorant of what it took to run an office and ignorant of what was involved. And I had to learn it on my own. It was the only office really that I'd ever spent time working in. So for me, everything that I did was an invention of the day following the prior day. I really didn't know. I reached out to others, but I did have a very clear vision of the type of work I wanted to be involved in. And that's why I'm kind of a believer in, it's not so much happiness because happiness is very elusive. I think it's really about having a vision of your own life and the type of thing you want to be involved in, and what really gets your interests charged up and your sense of self. And as Jason says, I don't want to get too ethereal or psychological, but the truth is, I do believe it's psychological. I think it's different for everyone. In school, we're taught that we can change the world. And then you get into the practice and you realize in some cases, you're a cog in the wheel. And sometimes you're a very important cog, sometimes you're not. But the reality is, not everyone is wired to take the risk and do it on their own. And if you feel that urge in you, you have to recognize that you have to decide, am I going to take the risk? For me, when I take risk, I like to know the exit strategy. But that's really the deal. It's a psychological thing, and I truly believe it's different for everyone. So I don't know. There's no formula. One of the interesting things about our profession is that of the total number of architecture firms there are, I think 95% are small and what are termed mid-size. Like my firm is actually probably small, even though we have a very large firm in Miami. In the context of the global firms, we are a small firm.
Well, let me go back to that for a second. So that's something that I should have tackled on with both of these. Like, when did you decide to jump off, and where did you decide to go when you decided to jump off? Physical location of firms and the like, to see, because I know that a lot of firms here, we've gone through pandemics, we're still in the middle of one, we went through a recession. So I know that everybody keeps jumping to different locations, or maybe you stuck with one location from the very beginning. So when you branched off on your own, where did you decide to go? Like,
Well, for me, I went home. I had no expenses in my house, and I was going to do all the work literally by myself, which I did for 2 years before I hired my first person. And I was extremely happy because I had a client that was great and the projects were great and they were small, but they gave me opportunity. But the point is that you have to take the risk. And when I believe, Eddie, that when you feel that inside you, it's time. That's the time you have to seriously think about it, because it's an emotional move. It's not something that's logical. It's
Yeah, that's such a good point. I think what Jason and Bernard are describing, that visceral feeling that's time, or I'm sure Daphne, I don't know if you felt it also, but for me, I was working and I was happy with what I was doing. And then all of a sudden I had 2 babies. And all of a sudden I wasn't enjoying running I was asked to run Architectonica's studio at one point. And it was something I'd been working towards 7 years. I was like at that moment. And when I had the 2 kids, I was like, life is short. I don't know that I want to practice this way. And I had worked with my husband, now partner. I loved working with him. And when the opportunity came for him to start the business, and I thought to myself, wait a second, we can practice our way. We can work, we can be together and do our thing. That just lit me up in a way that going back to do the same thing wasn't lighting me up anymore. And I think you gravitate in life. It's not this grand plan. It's not a business, for me anyway. It's about what lights you up, what gets you excited, and then designing a life that allows you to feel that as much as you possibly can. And if you can do it in the early years by going to a place where you don't have a huge overhead, so you can really focus on the work and on the people building and the strength, then that's a smart play, because a lot of people try to get everything in order on the other side and not enough on the vision of the studio and the people in the studio, the type of work you're going to be doing. Your why. You have to be really clear about your why. And I had been doing it for a very long time at that point. And I was very clear that on a personal level, I wanted to enjoy my family and I wanted to have control over my schedule, which, as Daphne mentioned, was not an opportunity that you had. I mean, when I came back from maternity leave with 2 kids under 3, Bernardo was like, hey, when are you going to start traveling to Hong Kong again? Because I was managing a 6.8 million square foot job. That didn't really appeal to me. It had appealed to, 28-year-old Jackie, but it wasn't so appealing to young 30s Jackie, because my life had changed. And you know what? That kind of like sitting with yourself and being real about how you want to practice, what lights you up, what gets you excited. I still love what I do. I have a passion for architecture. Just because you don't want to practice it the same way doesn't mean, you maybe have to create the way if you can't find it. And what Carlos and I got to was that we had been in all these firms, we had done it in different people's ways. We're grateful for the lessons, but now we wanted to do it our way. And if that feeling is within, I think I'm also getting metaphysical on you, but I think that's really it. It's a sort of, you can't imagine not trying it, at least. And you may try it, it doesn't go that time and you do it later, but I think if you feel it, if you have that person to work with, if you have that situation, a project, and you're like really excited about it and you think you can do it, then, I think there's no, the universe may not send you a business plan, but it'll send you enough kind of opportunities and doors opening and how you feel inside about it. Are you ready? Do you have the skills? Do you know? And then you go. I don't know if there's.
No, I get it.
I'll
Daphne, if I can, Daphne, I'm sorry,
yeah.
if I can, because we're in the last few minutes of this.
Oh,
So let's,
sure.
so let me tackle a few things on you. Keep it fun. So one of the last questions that I wanted to ask anyways is, what is the best piece of advice you had when you started your firm? So we could tackle 2 things with you here now, which is, when did you decide to jump off, so we could finish that thought? And also, what is a piece of advice that you wish you had? Because that
Sure.
can kind of go hand in hand. So you started
Sure,
your own thing?
it'll go hand in hand.
Yeah.
Sure. Just for everyone.
Daphne? Hold on.
Looks like we might have lost Daphne. You want to move to the next panelist?
Well, yeah, let's go with, let's go work our way
I did
backwards.
everything wrong.
Jackie. Oh,
But
wait,
it
we
was
got Daphne back.
you're
Sorry. Daphne, are you frozen again?
we're
Yeah.
having internet issues with your
All right,
connection.
while she thaws out, we'll go to Jackie.
Lesson I wish I'd learned.
Yeah, so if you had, yeah, so if
And
you
I
had,
see, and
what's the
I,
best piece of advice you wish you had when you
Okay.
were, when you started your firm?
boy, I think that the best, and I'm seeing it in some of the questions from people. I don't think that we get a lot on business and marketing in school. So I do think that getting a little bit more experience of that up front, because I had to learn it the hard way with a couple hard knocks. And I wish I had a little bit more paid attention to that. I don't know that it would have changed the outcome that much, but I do think that, especially if you're really design focused, we were fortunate that Carlos had spent some time doing contracts and really been groomed for that and as a director for a firm. But I myself really didn't encounter it until I did it for myself. And boy, that's a real painful way to learn those lessons. So I think it's definitely, money is not a dirty thing, and money is energy. And I think you need to embrace the fact that we are a business, not a nonprofit, and learning to kind of really make yourself profitable and do great design is the key, because you won't be around for very long if you can't do both.
And that's an important understanding, I think, for any architecture firm, understanding that, yes, we love to design, but we're also a business. So we have to have that understanding. That's a good piece of advice. Daphne, let's go back to you. Now that you're back.
Oh, I'm sorry. I don't know what happened. I got disconnected, but just
all
real
right.
quick. Yeah, the economy was a little bad in the 90s, so I had experience getting laid off. Went to grad school, came back. I was expecting to find a job. I just had new debt, student debt, no job. But anyways, the point is that having been laid off because of the economy made me realize how little control I had over my destiny. So the last time that I was laid off, that was what propelled me to say, okay, that's it. I'm not going to do this anymore. So I was totally unprepared to start a business because I hadn't really contemplated it. I had one child. There was one. I had just bought a house. And then almost immediately I got pregnant with my second child. So in the middle of all that, I was jump starting a business and no money, no clients. And I had to start from scratch. So the point is that, you know, if you're stubborn enough, you're going to succeed. If you want it bad enough, you're going to do it. Nothing's going to stop you, but you have to have that mindset that, you know, failure is not an option. And that's what it was for me. I could not fail. It was not an option. So it wasn't, you know, I made tremendous sacrifices, and so did Jose, my husband. We did to be able to grow the business and develop and create a brand and let people know what we could do. But yeah, it's been as rewarding as it has been sacrificial. Best advice is trust in yourself. Just take the leap of faith. Whenever you think you're ready, you probably won't be, but it doesn't matter. Just do it.
Good piece of advice. Bernard, let's go with you.
I have two. One
Sure.
is, if you're going to go out on your own, you have to realize that your personality is a really big part of what you're selling. So to address the issue of the money and the success of the firm, not only do you have to kind of design your own practice and have a vision of it, which is the other thing I've been saying, but I think you also need to understand that who you are and how you behave and what you do and your willingness to be out there on your own, talking to people and trying to explain to them why what you're offering is so important. If you're not comfortable doing that, it's probably not a good idea to try to do your own thing. And the second issue I guess I would raise is I'm a real believer in intuition. You know, I know I'm smart enough. I know I'm healthy psychologically, but there are times that you have to make a choice in the way you are and the way you act, and integrity and the way you behave, the willingness to take things on is going to define how people actually react toward you over time. And I think that intuition is a very good thing to rely on, because if you're not comfortable doing it, you shouldn't. On the other hand, if you are and you're willing to take the risk, I think that's how you keep moving up the ladder in terms of the types of commissions and et cetera. You know, I just from personal experience, you know, most people in AIA know that I was, you know, very adamantly involved in resisting Miami 21, and I just felt very strongly about that. And I can tell you, I was punished. But I also got a lot of integrity boost out of it. And people know that I do my best to speak the truth. And that is now a part of my own sense of what I think our firm stands for. So I think sometimes you're faced with a situation and you have to kind of be true to what you want to do. And intuition will lead you to the right answer. You either resist or you stay back, or you have to do what makes you comfortable and recognize that there's consequences for everything. So that's something that comes from a more mature firm probably, but I think most architects are not put in that position. But I still relate it to the same issue, which is every decision all along the way is really an intuitive one.
And that's what we
And
need. We need that mature mentality to be able to get that kind of question, to ask ourselves,
Right.
hey, would that be
Right.
suffice to get there?
well, otherwise you don't ever get a chance to even make the decision, right?
Jason, do you have what advice do you wish you had, or 3 months ago, or maybe you wish you had that advice 10 years ago? We don't know.
I think I guess, you know, I would say it'd be great if someone had just said, you know, don't be afraid, maybe, and be bold with what you do. I would say regarding what I think Bernard had said, you know, most of us, not myself included, you know, your name is on the firm, right? So Daphne, Gary, right? Bernard, Skovich. So you are your firm, right? You are going to be the leader. And you know, I guess I've been fortunate that I think I have, you know, been authentic to myself and the organizations and the things that I support and the way I do things, that all of that occurred in the past for me is helping me now. And I think that's really important to understand, that what you're doing now, whether you aspire to have your own firm in a year or 10 years, it's all really important. This is a small, I'll still say that this is a small town. I practice in much bigger markets like Boston or San Francisco. And if you want to do something here and you want to have a voice, and certainly Bernard has had a voice, I've had a voice. If you want to get on the design review board, if you want to get Project Z and all these things, you can do these things here in Miami, which makes it so exciting to have your own office, because there isn't, in most places, I think it's much harder to kind of do some of these bold things. And if you have the idea to create the underline, wow, like there's an underline now, you know, like, so I think you should don't be afraid to be bold, and put it out there.
All right. Thank you,
I'm
Jason.
sorry, I have to leave. I have to be on another call,
That's
but
okay.
thank you
I
very
think we're
much.
finishing
And,
up. Thank you, Bernard.
Please publish my email to anyone if they want to write a question. I'm happy to do my best answer. Thank you.
Thanks,
All right.
Bernard.
Thank you, Bernard. Thank you, Jason. Thank you, Jackie. And thank you, Daphne. Colleen, go
Yeah,
ahead.
this is a great place to stop, and we have people asking for more information, and it looked like we were kind of headed towards a small firm management thing, but no, that's awesome. But actually people are asking for that. So maybe that's something the committee would consider doing, because that's very interesting topics. But anyhow, our time is up. Thank you to everyone on the panel. This has been fascinating, and we've had a lot of people on. We're going to send everyone a short survey just to see how we did, because we want to keep our the quality of our programming up. And I'll also send you a link to the recording of this, so you can share it with friends if you like. It'll be a YouTube. And also check out AIA Miami for the information on upcoming events, especially like this Thursday's film, Owned, which talks about housing. Anyhow, thank you everyone. And Eduardo, great job.
Thank you.
And thank you everybody, and we'll see you
Thank
at the
you.
next event.
Thank you, guys. Thank you, everyone.
Ready?